Welcome back. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from today? We'd love to know. Now get comfortable, take a deep breath, and let's dive into today's gripping story. The air inside the courtroom felt like it had weight, heavier than stone and thicker than smoke, pressing down on every shoulder and throat. The overhead lights hummed faintly, and the faint click-click of cameras came from the back row, careful, measured, as if even the press didn't dare break the tension. Every seat in the gallery was taken. Not a shuffle, not a cough. Faces turned toward the front, toward the witness stand that sat in ready silence. It wasn't an ordinary quiet, not the kind filled with boredom or distraction, but a silence stretched tight like glass about to crack. It was full of what people brought here with them: unspoken questions, unhidden suspicion, dread, and that heavy ache of waiting for something you can't change. Claire Bennett sat at the prosecution's table, hands clasped together so tightly, in her lap that her knuckles were bone white. She'd prosecuted dozens of child abuse cases before. She'd faced jaded defendants, reluctant witnesses, guarded juries. But there was something about this case that clung to her in a way she'd never experienced before. It wasn't only the cruelty of the crime, though that was brutal enough on its own. It was that the entire case, the weight of truth, the hope for justice, balanced on the shoulders of one tiny, silent witness. Her name was Emma, 4 years old. Claire's eyes lifted toward the small wooden witness stand, the chair far too big for someone so little, its seat empty for now. She could picture her already, feet not reaching the floor, hands fidgeting with the fraying ear of the stuffed rabbit she carried everywhere. Emma hadn't spoken a single word since that night, the night her mother was left bleeding on the floor, barely clinging to life. The night police found Emma curled under a blanket in the hallway, clutching that stuffed bunny as if it were keeping her upright. The paramedics had said she didn't make a sound, didn't scream, didn't sob. She just stared at the flashing red and blue lights of police vehicles with a gaze too old and too empty for someone so young. That was 2 months ago. 2 long months of waiting, wondering, hoping for a breakthrough. The breakthrough had come in an unexpected form. Max. Max was no ordinary dog. A German shepherd with calm, steady eyes and a presence that seemed to take up more space than his frame could account for, Max was a trained therapy dog, one whose quiet patience had reached children where adults could not. He was the one waiting for Emma today. No one knew what would happen when the door opened. Not Claire, not the judge on the bench, not the seasoned officers who'd seen combat and cruelty alike. They only knew this had never been attempted before with Emma, and so they waited. Then, a faint metallic click. The door creaked open. The sound was small, but in the tension of that room, it was enough to make every head turn. The courtroom, already taut with silence, seemed to inhale even tighter. A small figure appeared in the doorway. Emma. Her shoulders were narrow and slightly hunched, as if she could fold herself small enough to become invisible. Her fingers gripped the hand of her foster mother, knuckles pale. She wore a pale yellow dress with tiny blue daisies, a bit wrinkled as if it had been clutched in nervous fists earlier that morning. In her other hand dangled the stuffed bunny, limp, threadbare, its left ear hanging on by a few stubborn stitches. The walkway to the stand looked impossibly long for steps as hesitant as hers. Her shoes made almost no sound on the floor. Each small foot seemed to float more than fall. She didn't scan the room so much as peek from behind lowered lashes, as though afraid to see too much all at once. Then came Max. The German shepherd walked just behind her right shoulder with slow, deliberate care. His navy vest read in neat, white block letters, "Therapy Dog, trained to comfort." The steady rhythm of his step matched hers exactly. The warmth in the room shifted. People stopped staring just at the girl. Now they watched the pair moving together. that massive, calm presence keeping pace beside something so small and fragile. Max's eyes were fixed forward, but his awareness seemed to stretch in all directions at once. There was no rush in him, no pull on the leash. He was just there, a living anchor for a child caught in the storm. They reached the front. Emma froze in place, tiny chin lifting just enough to let her eyes dart about. Past the witness box, past the tall bench where the judge sat like a mountain, past the rows of strangers sitting too still in their suits. Her grip on her foster mother's hand tightened visibly. Then her gaze fell on Max again. The shepherd was already waiting by the witness chair, sitting without command, posture relaxed but ready. His tail lay still. His calm was absolute. Emma's hand slid out of her foster mother's almost without thinking. She crossed the last few steps alone and knelt beside Max, her small arms circling his neck. Her face pressed deep into his fur, like someone opening a door to safety. She went utterly still. Max did nothing to shift her. No paw, no lick, no nudge. He stayed as he was, letting her hold on, his quiet acceptance filling the room in place of any words. The atmosphere shifted again, still silent, but now it was a silence pulled toward them like a tide. Even the court stenographer had stopped typing. Then Emma leaned forward and spoke, not to the lawyers, not to the judge, but into Max's ear. The words, meant only for him, were low and secret. But when she pulled her face away from his fur, her eyes locked on a man at the defense table, Thomas Reed. She didn't blink, didn't look away. He's a bad man. Her voice clear enough now for the room to hear, though the edges trembled with something between fear and defiance. No one breathed. Reed shifted in his seat, a glint of discomfort breaking his mask. Claire's eyes went sharp, her body leaning forward ever so slightly. She'd been in tight courtrooms before, but even she knew everything just changed. The murmur of shock was almost instant. But then Judge Simmons's voice cut through, reminding the jury with careful authority that Emma's statement wasn't official testimony. It wouldn't count as evidence, but everyone knew it was already lodged deep in their minds. Emma took the stand, still angled sideways, one hand resting on Max's thick fur like a lifeline. Claire didn't step to the podium to question her. Instead, she crouched to eye level, keeping her voice low and warm. "Hi, Emma. Remember me?" No answer. Instead, Emma leaned to Max again, whispered something else. The room held still. Then she reached into the pocket of her dress and withdrew a crumpled drawing, sliding it toward Claire. Claire unfolded it gently. The stick figures were unsteady, the colors hard-pressed and smudged. A child under a table, another figure on the ground. Over them, a larger shape holding something, the hands scribbled with harsh red strokes, messy but unmistakably violent. "He broke the table," Emma murmured without looking up. Mommy screamed. Claire raised the drawing toward the bench. This was in Emma's pocket. She drew it this morning before court. The jury leaned forward almost as one. Defense shot to his feet. Objection. Emotional manipulation. "Sit down, Mr. Reed," Judge Simmons replied evenly. "The jury knows how to weigh the evidence." When Claire asked if the drawing had been made for Max, Emma said nothing, only pressed her hand gently into the shepherd's back. In that moment, Claire realized Max wasn't just a dog here. He was Emma's voice, carrying what hers couldn't. Later in the hallway, long after the session was adjourned, Claire sat hunched, elbows on her knees, fingers locked together. She'd worked years on cases like this, but nothing had prepared her for the sheer force of a child's unguarded truth. Dr. Michael Hayes approached quietly, an envelope in hand. Inside, a recorder. His words were simple. "From last week's session, Guardian approved. You should hear it." In her headphones, Claire first heard paper rustling, then Emma's voice. "Max, he can come back, right?" Pause. He was mad. Mommy cried. The lamp broke. I was under the bed. Claire froze. No legal phrasing, no coaching, just truth. I wanted Max to be there. He would have kept me safe. Claire took the headphones off slowly, her chest tight, heat rising behind her eyes. One simple, devastating conclusion formed. With Max, Emma speaks. The recording wasn't just sound, it was Emma's truth. And the next day, in front of a silent, waiting court, the world would hear it. The next morning, every seat was again filled, eyes on Claire as she placed a small speaker on the table. Max lay calm at Emma's feet, her fingers buried in his fur. "Your Honor," Claire said, her voice steady but soft. "We'd like to submit a recording from a therapy session conducted last week between Emma and her psychologist, Dr. Michael Hayes. The session was legally recorded with full guardian consent." Judge Simmons gave a slow nod. "Proceed." Claire pressed play. A soft rustling filled the room. Then a child's voice, small, raw, remembering. No one moved. In the gallery, a woman silently covered her mouth with both hands. A young juror blinked rapidly, his knuckles white from gripping the arms of his chair. Even a police officer near the back, someone who had likely seen far too much, shifted uncomfortably. The recording stopped. Silence settled over the courtroom like a heavy fog. No one dared speak. Even Thomas Reed, who had objected to nearly everything since the trial began, sat still. Then he stood. This is speculative. The dog wasn't there. This is all fantasy. Claire didn't flinch. "You're right, Mr. Reed," she said, calmly. "Max wasn't there that night, but Emma was. And what you just heard wasn't fantasy. It was memory. A child's memory repeated in different forms in drawings, whispers, and now this." He turned to Thajery. "Max didn't translate her words. Trust did. And trust in that moment said everything." Claire didn't sleep much that night. She sat in her office long after the courthouse emptied, the only light coming from her laptop screen. Files. Timelines, audio logs, drawings spread out like puzzle pieces that almost fit but not quite. Then she saw it again. A grainy surveillance clip from a neighbor's front porch camera. Originally dismissed, poor lighting, no clear faces, distant audio. But now, with everything Emma had shared, it was worth one more look. She hit play. 9:47 p.m. A quiet street. A faint flicker of porch light. Then a sound. Muffled yelling. A sudden crash. Another noise. Higher, sharper, small. Claire leaned forward, rewound, slowed it down. And then she heard it. A child's voice. Small, fragile, piercing through the static like a cry trapped in time. Not imagined, not vague. "Mommy, hide." The words came out cracked, a scream caught between panic and pleading. Her voice was sharp with terror, trembling with the raw fear of a child who had seen too much. There was no mistaking it. Emma was crying as she said it. Her breath hitched in the background, as if she were sobbing, choking on fear, unable to do anything but beg her mother to run. It wasn't just a warning. It was desperation. A tiny voice trying to save someone much bigger than her. Claire's breath hitched. Her hand hovered over the keyboard, frozen mid-motion. Her heart slammed once hard, then kept tracing. She closed her eyes for half a second, but the voice echoed even louder in the silence of her mind. That wasn't a memory surfacing days later in therapy. That was Emma in real time witnessing violence and begging her mother to survive. Claire had spent her entire career listening to victims, parsing testimony, decoding trauma, but nothing had ever hit her like this single sentence. The next morning, she submitted the video for expert audio enhancement. When the courtroom filled. Again, anticipation buzzed like static. "Your Honor," Claire said, standing before the jury, With the court's permission, we'd like to present enhanced footage from the night of the incident provided by a neighbor's door camera. Judge Simmons nodded. The lights dimmed. The video played. Crash, yell, a heavy thud, then clearly and painfully, "Mommy, hide!" The courtroom froze. The voice was real, unmistakable, a moment frozen in trauma. A quiet sob came from the gallery. A juror wiped away a tear. Claire's throat tightened. It wasn't just a child's memory anymore. It was evidence, and it spoke louder than any argument. The silence after the video ended was unlike anything that had come before. It wasn't just still. It was stunned, as if the room itself needed armament to breathe. Claire stood slowly. She let the weight of the moment settle before continuing. "We now know," she began, her voice calm but clear, "that Emma's account is not only consistent across drawings, therapy sessions, and spoken testimony, it now aligns with audio from the actual night of the attack." She turned and faced the jury, but there's more. She walked over to the monitor and brought up another slide. A grainy still from an ATM security camera taken just 10 minutes before the 911 call that night. The timestamp blinked, 37 p.m. The image showed a man in air-ed tie walking past the apartment building. Claire highlighted his face. "This is Thomas Reed." The room shifted. Reed's expression barely flinched, but this posture stiffened. Claire clicked again. "And this," she said, switching to a cell tower record, "is Mr. Reed's phone pinging less than 100 yards from Emma's home during the time of the assault. Another slide, a bank statement, a wire transfer. The sender, a business connected to Martin Blake, the mother's former boyfriend. Known for violent outbursts and now curiously absent." "We believe Mr. Reed was hired to threaten Emma's mother," Claire said firmly. "But something went wrong. He went further." "Lies!" Reed snapped, rising suddenly. "That's fiction. All of it." Before the judge could respond, a small voice rose from the witness chair. "It's him," Emma said. Everyone turned. She stood beside Max, her tiny hand resting on the German Shepherd's back. Her voice didn't shake. "He's the man I told you about, the bad man. I knew it from the first day." Max growled softly. The courtroom held its breath. Judge Simmons banged her gavel. "Mr. Reed, you are under arrest and will be held without bail pending criminal charges. Bail is denied." Two officers approached. Reed stepped back, his face pale, breath quickening, his eyes darted wild and panicked, looking for a way out that didn't exist. His hands shook as they reached for him. When the cuffs clicked shut, he flinched hard like the sound itself had cut through him. Then he saw Emma, and for the first time, fear, no arrogance, filled his eyes. He looked smaller, cornered, exposed. No one needed to say a word. He knew it was over. When Emma's mother finally woke, everything made sense. The fog of pain and silence lifted, and the first thing she remembered wasn't the attack, but Annemie. Emma. Her voice cracked. Her body was weak, but the memory of her daughter's face that had never left her. When they finally reunited, it wasn't dramatic. No speeches, no questions, just arms wrapped around each other like they'd never let go again. "I remembered you," she whispered into Emma's hair. "You were the only thing I saw, the only thing I held on to." Emma didn't say anything. She didn't have to. She just pressed her face into her mother's chest and breathed. For the first time in weeks, she let herself be small again. Not a witness, not a brave girl on a stand, just a daughter in her mother's arms. From that day, everything began to shift. Emma laughed a little more. She started humming again. Her drawings were full of color, sun, trees, a house, and always Max. He stayed beside her like Heelways had, watching, guarding, healing. And one warm afternoon, Emma sat on the porch steps, her head resting on Max's back. Her mother sat behind her, brushing her hair gently with her fingers. Emma closed her eyes, leaned into Max, and smiled.